Hi everyone and welcome back. In this topic we'll be looking at the causes of globalisation. We'll be covering the first point in section 4.2.6.1, globalisation, in the course specification. So let's get started. Let's begin by asking, what is globalisation? Well, globalisation is the process of increasing economic integration of the world's economies. This is a really important definition, so you should take time to learn and understand it. Some economists argue that globalisation has been taking place since ancient times. However, we won't be looking that far back in time. The term globalisation began to appear in economic literature in the 1980s, and today is generally accepted by economists as referring to the significant increases in the interconnectedness of economies around the world that started in the 1970s. The factors discussed in this topic have all changed significantly in this time period, and they are therefore seen as key contributors to the phenomenon known as globalisation. So, if we are to answer the question, what are the causes of globalisation, it may be best if we rephrase the question to be more specific. Let's instead ask ourselves, what changes have taken place in the past 50 years that have resulted in the increased integration of economies around the world? The answer is that there are many changes that have taken place over the past half decade that have led to globalisation. In this video, we'll look at 6 factors that are commonly accepted to be key contributors to globalisation. So, whilst you should learn and remember these factors and be able to discuss them in your exam, there will be others that you may learn about through other sources, and you could discuss those as well. The 6 causes of globalisation that we will focus on in this topic are trade liberalisation, improvements in communications, improvements in transport, greater international specialisation, the expansion of multinational corporations overseas, and the growth of trading blocs. Let's start by taking a look at trade liberalisation. Trade liberalisation is the reduction or removal of restrictions on the free exchange of goods between countries. These restrictions are sometimes known as trade barriers. There are 2 broad types of restrictions that a country could place on imports and exports: tariff restrictions and non-tariff restrictions. A tariff is a tax on an import or export and includes payments such as duties and surcharges. Non-tariff restrictions includes all other restrictions such as quotas and embargoes. A quota is a limit on the number of units of a good or service that may be imported to or exported from a country, and an embargo is an outright ban on trade in certain goods or services. The use of restrictions like these on trade by a country is known as protectionism, and the trade liberalisation that has taken place over the past 50 years could be said to have reduced protectionism. Next up, we're looking at how improvements in communications have made it much quicker, easier and cheaper to communicate with people in other countries and facilitate international trade. For example, the costs of making international phone calls has decreased over time, and more people have mobile phones, making it easier to reach others. The ability to send and receive emails has meant that sending messages and documents over long distances is very cheap. All you need is a device that is capable of sending emails and an internet connection, and the email is received almost instantaneously in most cases. The ability to make video calls with 2 or more people has meant that holding physical meetings is no longer difficult. And the internet has allowed for information to be instantly available to those who need it. For example, businesses are able to advertise the goods and services they provide to a global audience. And online shopping has meant that buying and selling goods overseas is a lot easier. Improvements in transport have reduced both the costs of shipping goods overseas and the time taken to do so. Both planes and ships have got larger, meaning that thanks to economies of scale, the cost of shipping goods over long distances has fallen. Deregulation in aviation has allowed new entrants into the market, and this competition has driven down prices and encouraged innovation. Containerisation in shipping, which was the introduction of shipping containers as standard sizes, in which goods can be loaded, has meant that loading and unloading ships takes much less time, and these containers can even be loaded onto lorries for transport by road if needed. All of these things have reduced the cost and time taken to ship goods over long distances. Greater international specialisation means that countries specialise in producing certain goods or services. This has had the effect of reducing costs, increasing quality, encouraging product innovation, and widening choice and selection in products. All of these things together will encourage international trade. Businesses increasingly operate overseas, meaning they buy, sell and produce their good or service in multiple countries. These are known as multinational corporations, or MNCs. Reducing costs in order to maximise profits is a big incentive to do this. Labour and other resources are sometimes less expensive overseas. Governments sometimes give incentives, such as lower taxes, to encourage foreign businesses to invest in their country. We call this foreign direct investment, or FDI. And increasing the number of markets they operate in will allow businesses to take advantage of economies of scale and therefore maximise their profits. Growth in the number and size of international trading blocs have facilitated global trade. By the way, trade blocs are just groups of countries who, through formal agreements, reduce or completely remove barriers to trade. There are different types, such as single markets, customs unions, free trade areas, and monetary unions. Anyway, trading blocs such as the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, the Southern Common Market, Mercosur, and the European Free Trade Area, EFTA, have all reduced or removed barriers to trade. The World Trade Organization, or WTO, have introduced global product standards, which have meant consumers have more confidence in buying from abroad. And previously closed economies have opened up to foreign trade and overseas investment. For example, this happened with the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the opening of China. Now we've reached the end of this topic, let's take time to summarise what we've learned. Globalisation is the process of increasing integration of economies internationally. There are many factors which have changed in the past 50 years and have led to increasing interconnectedness of economies. Trade liberalisation has reduced or completely removed restrictions on international trade. Improvements in communications have made it cheaper and easier for buyers and sellers to communicate. Developments in transport have reduced both the cost and time taken to ship goods around the world. Greater international specialisation means that countries specialise in producing certain goods or services. Businesses are increasingly operating in foreign countries. This could include buying, selling and producing goods or services overseas, and we call these multinational corporations, or MNCs. There has been growth in the number and size of international trading blocs, and this has facilitated global trade and foreign investment. That's it for this video. Thanks for listening, everyone.